Sydney, Australia, take a bow. Congratulations, Australia. You did it. From start to finish, it's been wonderful. Ian Thorpe shone. Susie O'Neill was divine. Kathy Freeman could easily become the first Indigenous Pope. The infrastructure held up. The weather was mostly grand. The volunteers were an inspiration. The fans were uniformly good-natured. Hardened criminals gave back everything they had ever stolen and helped little old ladies across busy roads. Never before have 4 million people behaved so impeccably. Only Marie-Josée Perrick went away unhappy. We are pretty good at parties. A Sydney friend, Patrick Gallagher, told me when I asked him the other day how he accounted for the success of it all. And this has really just been one big party, hasn't it? Indeed, it has. For 17 days, Sydney, normally the most happy and easygoing city on earth, has been the most happy and easygoing city on earth. That really is the miracle of it, if you ask me. That Sydney behaved as if putting on the biggest logistical exercise on the planet was really no trouble at all. I don't wish in my giddiness to overstate matters, but I invite you to suggest a more successful event anywhere in the peacetime history of humankind. Certainly, I know of no other occasion when so many people were so continuously cheerful. It's as if they put something in the water, another Australian acquaintance told me. I was on a commuter train when the news came through that Australia had won the women's water polo, and suddenly everyone on the train started singing Waltzing Matilda. If you had told me 6 months ago that the day would come when I would sing Waltzing Matilda with strangers on a train because we'd won the women's water polo, I would have encouraged you to seek treatment. It's been utterly bizarre, but quite wonderful. Nearly everybody agrees that the city has never run so smoothly. For reasons that nobody seemed entirely to understand, the streets have remained largely free of traffic, so that talking about how swiftly one has managed to get from point A to point B has become the principal subject of discourse in the city. Formerly, if you were a visitor to Sydney, locals would take you to the Botanic Gardens or northern beaches, or possibly to lunch at a nice fish restaurant. These days they drive you up and down Parramatta Road or the Pacific Highway, pointing out traffic black spots that have become miraculously free-flowing. And constantly they say things to you like, guess how long it took me yesterday at 3 in the afternoon to get from Chatswood to Potts Point by way of the harbour tunnel. Why, I have no idea, Bob, you reply. I can't say I actually care. Just guess. I don't know. 40 minutes? 18 minutes, Bob cries triumphantly from behind a sudden sheen of manic happiness. That's good, isn't it? That's good, is it? You say politely. Good? It's bloody brilliant. Now guess how long it took Betty's boss's cousin to get from Tarella to Spit Junction last Friday, setting off at 4:15 in the afternoon in a 1982 Honda Inard holding in it that was overdue for a service, and bearing in mind that there were lane closures on the approaches to the Anzac Bridge. And so it goes for up to 4 hours, as Bob describes the traffic movements that he, his neighbors, and all their motoring acquaintances have enjoyed since the Olympic began. I realize I speak only for myself here, but it will be a relief when traffic resumes its normal stately crawl and conversations returns once again to cricket, property prices, and how there is nothing to watch on television. I suspect it will be a relief for most Australians to get life back to normal, but clearly there are many who wish the games would just go on forever. Already they have come to seem a wholly natural, all but permanent part of the city life. What will it be like when there are no big television screens to glance at as you walk through the city, no Olympic rings aglow on the harbour bridge, and what a brilliant touch, if I may say, that was. No cries of delight from every pub as some Aussie babe in a bikini spikes a volleyball through a competitor's arms, bringing pride and joy to the nation. Sydney is going to seem a very quiet place. When I asked an Australian journalist what he thought it would be like when the games have ended and the visitors have gone, he gave a wan smile and said, "It will be as if they have all gone, but they have all got into their rocket ships and gone back to their own planets. I think Australia is going to seem a very lonely place for a few days." I must confess I hadn't realized quite the degree of attachment many Australians have been feeling until I picked up the Sydney Morning Herald on Saturday and found an article on the front page solemnly advising readers. For many people, the end of the Olympics is going to bring a feeling of loss, not unlike a grieving process. Everyone should be ready for that and give themselves time to grieve. Goodness, and to think I thought these were merely some quadrennial sporting entertainments. The article went on to suggest that now was a good time to take up a new hobby, to try to get out more, even to consider a career change. Above all, it added, don't be afraid to seek help if your relationship is going through a rocky patch. Think of it as taking on an Olympic-style coach rather than seeing it as a weakness. All I can say is, thank goodness these people have not also been following the Boston Red Sox this year, or they would be feeling very low indeed. So desperate have many people grown over the prospect of post-Olympic oblivion that the second most popular subject of conversation in the city has been speculating on the possibility of getting the games back again. The scenario that seems to be emerging is that Athens have improved itself incapable of organizing a piece-up in a Resina factory, much less something as demanding as an Olympic Games, will have to pull out, and the panicked IOC will come running to Sydney to rescue it from the crisis. It's an appealing thought, but it will be a huge mistake. The games would never be, simply couldn't be, as good again. My thought, and I have to say I think it's a good one, is that Australians should permanently embrace the Paralympics. Australians are good-hearted people. They love sport. They adore an occasion, an excuse to set off some fireworks. The Paralympics are a terrific and worthwhile event. Why not do for them forever what the country has done for the Olympics? Anyway, I dare say NBC, the American television network, would kick up an awful fuss if anybody tried to bring the games back to Sydney in 2004. As everybody knows, the games have been a ratings disaster for American television. I have no idea how much influence television networks have on the running or sighting of the games. None, I hope, but you can be pretty certain that any future purchasers of television rights will lobby hard to keep the games in a more economically accommodating time zone. Incidentally, since hardly anybody ever has a good word to say about the IOC, I would like to commend it on 2 points. I think it is admirable in the extreme that the IOC doesn't allow any advertising into Olympic venues. I loved the way the Goodyear name had to be changed to Good Day and Good Luck on the blimps. It is also noble of it, I think, to continue to allow the games to be held in places like Sydney and Athens, which are not necessarily ideal for US television broadcasts. As long ago as 1972, at the Munich Games, it looked very much as if American television would appropriate the Olympics in much the way it has all but taken over so many domestic sporting events. Just to take one example, in the Super Bowl football championship, the broadcasting network is actually permitted to call timeouts at intervals throughout the game purely for the purpose of showing extra commercials. This is in addition, you understand, to the many natural breaks in the games when it also shows commercials. True Olympics aficionado may remember the 1972 games as the ones in which the Soviet Union pipped the United States in the basketball championship with a basket that every American believes, and rightly as it happens, came after the buzzer sound. What is largely forgotten now is that that game was held in the middle of the night in Munich so that the American television could beam it live to the largest possible US audience. I don't know how or why the authorities at the IOC have resisted such pressures ever since, but God bless them for it. What American audiences have yet to learn is that one of the joys of following important sporting events taking place in distant land is having to watch them at the oddest and most inconvenient hours. It not only proves devotion beyond doubt, but in a perverse way adds to the satisfaction. Interestingly, although hardly anybody in America has watched the present games, everybody has come away with a clear impression that Australia is a beautiful, friendly, modern, cringe-free country with a great deal more to it than kangaroos and crocodile Dundee. So encouraging are the tourism prospects that Qantas and the Australian Tourism Commission are spending 7 million Australian dollars on an intensive 5-week advertising campaign in the United States featuring, but of course, Paul Hogan playing Crocodile Dundee. The decision, according to the Australian Financial Review, follows a surge of interest in the US about the latest Crocodile Dundee sequel. Surely the first and last time that the words surge of interest and Crocodile Dundee have enjoyed such happy proximity in print. Lifting Australia's profile and boosting tourism were of course among the main justifications for staging the games in the first place. Tourism is now the biggest foreign exchange earner in the Australian economy. Although the numbers of overseas visitors have doubled in a decade to more than 4.5 million last year, it remains modest by world standards. Lourdes, for instance, gets more than 3 times as many visitors each year as the whole of Australia. So there is certainly plenty of room for growth and plenty of room in most parts of the country for more tourists, though where tourists want to go and where there is plenty of room for them are of course matters that seldom coincide. In any case, according to figures from a body called the Tourism Forecasting Council, the attention generated by the Olympics is expected to bring an extra 1.6 million visitors to the country between now and 2004, enriching the economy by 6.1 billion Australian dollars and leading to the creation of 150,000 additional jobs. All marvelous if true. Much less quantifiable are the other economic benefits that may accrue more generally from the games. On the face of it, the numbers seem enchantingly huge, but in the context of the overall economy, the benefits of the games are actually pretty marginal. Since 1995, spending on Olympic infrastructure has added 3.3 billion Australian dollars to Sydney's economy. A tidy sum, to be sure, but as an economic analyst noted in the Herald on Tuesday, it represents just 1/300th of economic activity in New South Wales in the period and 1/900th in Australia as a whole. Altogether, 5.1 billion Australian dollars windfall New South Wales is forecast to recap from the Olympics over a span of 12 years. From 1994 to 2006 is expected to add just 0.25% to the state's gross domestic product. Considering all the costs and risks, Sydney can consider itself very lucky if, as forecast, it manages to come away with a small profit. Montreal, as is often noted, is still paying for its games almost a quarter of a century after they finished. One thing that seems increasingly possible is that we may never see the likes of these games again. Many believe the Olympics have grown too big too ambitious and much too accommodating to trivial sports and not terribly elite athletes. The world may have been charmed by the hapless thrashings of Eric Musambani, the Equatorial Guinean who took whole minute to complete an uncontested swimming heat, but it has to be asked whether someone who can barely swim deserves a spot at the Olympics. The athletes' village has been just packed, ridiculously so, one Australian team official told me. And all those athletes have trainers and doctors and support staff and various hangers-on. It has reached the point where if they don't do something to scale back the numbers, it's going to become impossible to manage. There may, however, be an event more elemental and potentially troubling problem for the future scale of the games, namely that Americans could simply be losing interest in them. I think the Olympics are over, a media analyst named Marian Saltzman told the Washington Post, perhaps just a tad sweepingly, in early September. The view she represents is that most American viewers are not much interested in the sports of the Olympics offer. Certainly, many sports that have significant followings elsewhere, swimming, soccer, gymnastics, anything involving a horse, a boat, a small ball, or a shuttlecock, are of nil interest to Americans outside the Olympic period, and of less than hearty interest even then. Although nearly all criticism on NBC viewing figures have focused on the network's coverage, it is possible that it is trying to sell its audience something the audience really doesn't want any longer. Since American enterprises overwhelmingly underwrite the costs of the Olympics, NBC, as is well known, has paid a whopping $3.5 billion for the rights to the Olympics through 2008, while American companies account for no less than 70% of corporate sponsorship. This clearly could have repercussions for the future of the Games. So it seems entirely possible that Sydney will stand as a pinnacle for the modern Olympics, a time when the largest number of people enjoyed the biggest games in the most cheerful circumstances possible. Personally, I don't think we will ever see another social and sporting spectacle to match it. Perhaps all the Aussie grieving isn't entirely misplaced after all.